Thanks,
And
Prof.
welcome, Prof. Jones.
Okay, so it's indeed my pleasure to introduce Prof. Robert Jones. He's the Chancellor of the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. He's also served as the President of the University of Albany. And he's an experienced scientist and research university leader. I think the nice thing about that I want to highlight is also that he got his PhD at the University of Missouri. And, you know, we are tight with the University of Missouri because of our long partnership. So that's really great. I would like to highlight some of his public engagement work, because I think that is where he's going to give us some good pointers and share some of his ideas. At the University of Minnesota, he created the first urban research outreach stroke community center, which was named in his honor in 2015. From 1984 to 1994, he worked as a consultant in the arts to Archbishop Tutu South African education program, which educated more than 3,000 South Africans in American universities. And I think that means he has a true understanding of our context, because he's traveled wide and he's been at all the institutions at UWC, in South Africa. At Illinois, he's established the Illinois Commitment, a program that guarantees 4 years of free tuition and fees to state residents with family incomes less than $67,100 a year. He serves on the board of directors for APLU, Campus Compact, Farm Foundation, the National 4-H Council, and the Donald Danford Plant Science Center. He's a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences and a fellow of the American Society of Agronomy and Crop Sciences Society. He's an accomplished vocalist and was a member of the Grammy Award-winning Sounds of Blackness choral ensemble for 30 years. And Prof. Levac was saying she's so happy that there's another vocalist, because as we know, Prof is our person for music. And so welcome, Professor Jones. We are very excited to hear what you have to share with us.
Well, first of all, even after 24 months of COVID, I always need to make sure that I'm unmuted. So I hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah, thank you.
We can, Prof.
Okay, well, good afternoon. And let me start by, first of all, thanking Professor Daniels for the invitation to be part of this colloquium today. And Prof. Levac, I certainly look forward to meeting you in person. And who knows, maybe we might do a duet and cut an album or soundtrack together. That would be great fun. Well, let me start by saying, as was indicated, the University of Western Cape is a place that holds great significance to me, both professionally and personally. As was indicated, I had the great pleasure and privilege of spending quite a bit of time, not only at UWC, but in Cape Town, and actually across a significant portion of South Africa and Namibia. As early in my career, I had the great honor of working with Archbishop Desmond Tutu as a part of the South African education program, which I think you all may recall, was a program that had a very clear goal and objective, and that was how to prepare South Africa post-apartheid by educating more Black South African students in American universities. And I think it was a very lofty goal and one that I take great pride in participating in. And it was at UWC where I first met someone I think that most of you remember or know of, and that is A.B. Daniels, who was a university registrar at the time, I think, and a member of the SAEP National Council. And A.B. started out as a respected professional colleague and quickly became a cherished friend. He taught me the finer things of South African cuisine as well as South African wines. And it was at that same time that I had a great pleasure of meeting his family, including his daughter, Pricilla, who would go on to be, I think, one of the finest examples of the success story and the impact that the SAP program had in reaching the goals that Archbishop Tutu has set. And I have been able to watch her education and professional career unfold with great pride and the enormous impact of her work, not only when she was a newly minted researcher and faculty member at UWC, but most recently as the architect of UWC's very impressive and comprehensive community engagement model. So if you want to look at an example, I believe anywhere in the world of a university that I believe is doing it right, and I say this not because I know the place and I know many of the past leaders of the university and a few of the current faculty and staff, you don't have to look any further than the University of Western Cape, and I can tell you I take great pride in that. So to Professor Levac and Professor Daniel, congratulations on the foundation that you've created here. And thank you for inviting me again to be part of this colloquium. And it is really good to be back at the University of Western Cape because it does hold such a special place in my heart. And I'm so happy to be here, even if it's only virtual. And more broadly, thank you to the University of Western Cape for organizing this event and for putting today's focus on how universities can and must prioritize community engagement in order to truly have the kind of global impact on our society and the kind of global impact that society will need for the 21st century and beyond. This is a subject that, as Pricilla indicated, is very, very important to me because I have spent most of my last 20 years or so of my career trying to develop approaches and strategies and creating more consistent, effective, and highly comprehensive public engagement work at the institutional level. I'm very, very fortunate to have been in a place where getting faculty involved was no problem. But how do you institutionalize that impact for more sustainability and bigger impact? So I believe the critical question of our time is, how can universities like those that we all represent translate our tremendous physical, intellectual, educational, and political power into economic and social prosperity, as well as the overall quality of life for all members of our community? And we can do this in a scalable and a sustainable way, I believe, but it's going to take a lot of strategic thinking, a lot of commitment to make this happen. So how do we move? The fundamental question is that we always pose at every place that I've been. How do we move from being a university that offers public engagement programs to being a university that is truly and fully engaged with the communities that we serve? So that's the fundamental question of today. And I know Professor yesterday has touched on many of the things that I also fundamentally agree with. And so we'll see how much alignment that exists between his presentation and mine today. But how do we become anchors in our communities and partners for greater prosperity? That is that's a responsibility we should take very, very seriously. To give a little bit of context again for my remarks, in addition to the introduction that Pricilla gave, I am a plant physiologist by training and spent more than 34 and a half years leading a very large research program at the University of Minnesota, concurrent with probably the last 25 years of that as the Senior Vice President for Academic Administration, and had responsibility for moving Minnesota's public engagement activities in a way that I'm very, very proud of, and I'll talk a little bit more about later. And it was also noted, I've been around higher education now, getting a little long in the tooth, as they say, for about 43 years as a faculty member, Senior Vice President, and President of the University of Albany in New York, where I also drove public engagement. And I am entering my 6th year as the Chancellor of the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. And I'm also a Vice President of the University of Illinois system. But one of my top priorities is how do we really drive public engagement at this world-class land-grant, largest public research university in the state of Illinois. So in my remarks today, I really do want to base my comments based on my personal and professional experience. My education and my career has been spent entirely within the sphere of American public university system. And most of that university experience has been in what we refer to as land grant university. These, as I think most of you know, are a unique subset of the U.S. university system that was established in the 1860s. These land grant universities were established with the specific charge to put information and education in the hands of the citizen with the express purpose of contributing to the economic, social growth of the communities around us. In some way by educating the underserved communities, and in other ways by taking that knowledge and applying it to bring about change in community. And of course, the specific challenges community face, whether you're talking about in Mid-America, Northeastern America, are going to vary in many respects from those that you might find in Cape Town or Rome or the United Kingdom or Shanghai, Brazil. But I do believe that geography and demographics and other core needs of our communities, there's a common thread that runs across these communities, and the impact of specific strategies are going to have to be nuanced and specific in some ways, but there are some common things that I think are going to serve or strategies that all universities can use to bring about change. There's one common thread that does tie all of this together, I believe, and holds true for all of us in global higher education. And that is we're going to have to be the anchors of our community and for engagement and economic development. Well, if we do this, we must understand the unique needs of our community, and we must recognize the distinctive capabilities and the personal aspects and characteristics of our institution in order to be able to develop the systems and the programs and the processes that are the right ones and the right connections at the right intersection to bring about change. Because we don't want to, my operating philosophy is to do no harm in general. But particularly, as Prof apparently said yesterday, we must do no harm to our communities. So we need to think more comprehensively and more broadly about our responsibilities. We just cannot continue to focus our attention on the 4 or 5 years of our undergraduate students' life and how we impact that from the day that they arrive on campus. But we must change our direction to focus more clearly and more squarely on cradle to career orientation that openly acknowledge our responsibility to prepare and to educate from birth and extends throughout a lifetime. I believe it's absolutely critical to have a full and honest understanding of place, both in terms of geographic locations and in terms of the hearts and minds of the members of a given community. This must guide the steps we take, the goals that we set, and the processes we put in place to align with these distinctive personalities of our respective institutions. And we have to be present where the people are, and we have to establish ourselves as a trusted, trustworthy partner in this collective mindset. And I think more critically important and perhaps more urgently, universities that fail to move forward more actively, more honestly, and more equally engaged in relationships with communities will not be the ones that are going to thrive and grow in the 21st century and beyond, because we are losing the public trust. And if we continue down the path that we're in now, in the next decades ahead of us, we will certainly lose more public trust. And I fundamentally believe that public engagement is the best way to restore trust by the public in our higher education system. So community engagement and public engagement can no longer be simply add-ons or optional components of our mission. They must become wholly integrated into our values and our operations, beginning as our organizing principles for our university. It is certainly can no longer be business as usual in higher education. It has to become, as we say at my place, business as unusual. And in the United States, we're seeing fundamental changes in funding models, shift to multiple and interdisciplinary research, changing student demographic, increase internationalization, different faculty expectations, and external pressures require our mission to meet current societal realities. So to both solve and really challenge and seize these opportunities, I do believe that we have to think and act differently. But I'm willing to wager that most of you will find resonance with the fact that things have changed. The need for public engagement has never been greater across this world, and we are the ones, and the responsibility for doing so runs squarely through our university. So those of us in our higher education can find ourselves immersed in a broad range of cultural and economic and political and local and regional and global issues, and many are around some of the questions and values and relevance of the impact of the work we do. And so we find ourselves competing for time with other priorities and for funding and for public support. So we're really in a situation where students and citizens and governments we serve are demanding more and more of us, even as their trust and their support for our operation is certainly declining. And I'm not an economist, but I do know that this is not a sustainable model for our universities, whether you're talking about America or South Africa. And changing and improving the ways that we engage with our community is one way that we can start to restore trust and address societal changes. But we have to start locally and act more globally. So let me start with just a few principles, and then I'll give you a few examples, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. The 21st century approaches to community engagement, I believe, is predicated on three guiding principles, and some of these have already been mentioned yesterday. It has to be integrated with all aspects of our university work, our teaching, our research, and our outreach activities. Community engagement is not a separate mission, but a strategy to accomplish all of our missions. It is about working with communities, and this is one that's starting to resonate around the world, rather than doing for or to communities. We need to think in terms of partnerships, not projects. We must move away from developing short-term projects or individual activities toward a more coordinated, systematic approach that emphasizes building partnership. And I'm very big on the notion of partnerships, because partnerships move at the speed of trust, and there has to be reciprocity if a partnership is truly going to work. The institutions that are emerging as leaders and most successful in this work are moving from being simple universities with engagement programs to ones that are comprehensively engaged universities. Engaged universities should reward faculty members who conduct scholarship that addresses important social issues. They embed social responsibility, focused ideals in their student academic programs, and they have systematic campus-wide strategies and agendas to put in place the policies and the structures around culture of engagement. But when you set out to build this kind of systemic approach, you also have to recognize that this process takes time. It requires institutional leadership, investment. It requires attention and prioritization. And one of the three universities where I have had the pleasure of serving across my 43-year career, one good example of a university that I believe has, just like UWC, has really thought about this very deeply and has really taken the issue of public engagement seriously and systematically integrated and it across the entire value system of the university, goes back to an effort that I had the pleasure of starting about 20 years ago at the University of Minnesota. And I'll talk about just these three examples in these three universities very briefly. In the late 1990s, university identified that it needed to have a more coordinated effort across the university engagement with the local community. As a land-grant university, it had research and outreach centers in every geographical region of the state. We had extension offices in all, I'll get the number wrong, but it must have been something like 132 counties across the state of Minnesota. Very small state, but a lot of counties. And that work was systematic, it was supportive, but we felt that we really were not engaged. As being one of the few land-grant universities located in an urban community, it took a meeting with the community where the light finally went off in our heads. And when a member of the community asked us, say, well, what is the university's urban agenda? The president of the university looked at me, and I was the senior vice president, and I looked at him, and we both had to admit publicly, we really didn't have an urban agenda. But that was the point of departure for us to think more systematically about our role as the largest research university in the state of Minnesota. There's only two educational systems in that state of about 5 million people. And we had a responsibility, as I put it, as much responsibility to serve the community up in the Red River Valley, which is kind of the breadbasket of the Midwest. We had as much obligation to serve people in urban communities as we had to serve people in the breadbasket. Long story short, we embarked upon a strategy to renovate an old strip mall that had fallen into disrepair, and most of the stores were being closed. There were drugs being dealt right out front every morning. I would drive by there on the way to work, and you could see the teenagers out there dealing drugs right next to a police precinct. And so to me, it became the most logical place to implement a strategy, a place-based strategy in the community. And after many conversations with the community, after being accused of trying to bring a Tuskegee experiment to North Minneapolis that is very heavily communities of color, we persevered and was able to renovate, purchase that old shopping center for over $1 million, even though I could have gotten it from the city for $1. I felt it wasn't the right thing to do. And we spent another $2 to $3 million renovating it. In 2009, it opened as the first place-based strategy by the university outside of its proper campus. And it was called the Urban Research Outreach and Engagement Center, or UROC. It is now a permanent community-based research center located in the heart of this underserved community that has long been disenfranchised and underserved by the city of Minneapolis and by the university. Population very diverse, economically challenged, and the residents were basically grown a bit tired of being the subjects of research projects for the university, but not having a sense of any voice in that, how that research was structured. And as they said to me unequivocally, we don't feel like you come here and you study us, you study our children, but we don't have any sense of ownership for the data. You know, and being a scientist, when they started talking about owning the data, I had to admit I was a little bit of pushback, but I began to understand exactly what they were saying. They wanted to understand and thought they deserved some feedback from the scholarship done on them so that they could use it to shape policy and to improve their communities. And so we're very, very proud. I think UROC is both an outreach and engagement center, and it's also a hub of community engagement that brings the community together in strategic ways. It also brings our researchers and university resources to pursue programs and initiatives that benefit the entire community. It's a wide range of activities, from nutritional programs to computer refurbishing programs, providing computers to members of the underserved community to deal with the digital divide, pre-K through 12 outreach programs, and just really has become a major resource for that community. And then let me compare that with the University at Albany, State University of New York at Albany, which I left Minnesota after 34 and a half years to become the president of SUNY Albany. University at Albany is one of 64 campuses within the massive SUNY system. It's the third largest research university in that system, located in Albany, New York, which is the state's capital. and it has a very high underserved population. And there was a desire, we created a desire to have a more educated workforce that was being fueled by the region's transformation into a medical science enterprise and a high-tech hub. It became a place where places like Global Foundries, one of the big chip manufacturers, decided to locate a major manufacturing operation. So at Albany, I want you to remember this if you don't remember anything else I say about Albany. Community engagement drove the academic strategy. Now, ask yourself how many places you know of where community engagement, desire to be more engaged with the community, actually drove the academic strategy. I was very pleased to catalyze the largest academic expansion in more than 50 years at University of Albany, and it was focused in large measure by our desire to create the academic programs that would allow us to have the biggest impact in the community. The prime example of that was the creation of a new school of engineering and applied sciences. This was a $60 million project that was very purposefully that rescued and renovated a decaying high school that was ironically on the edge of the downtown campus of the university, which was located in the heart of the underserved community. So we chose this location so that we could have a bigger impact on STEM education and to get the community to think differently about the possibilities and the role that the university had in driving more economic opportunity for underprivileged people from all social economic backgrounds. And so pleased that space continues to be developed as really a business generator and a revitalization strategy for the entire, what we call Hudson Valley region. And so very proud of what we were able to do there. And then lastly, I've been at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. I'm 5 years and 30 days almost into my 6th year as chancellor of this university. And this is a classic example of what can happen when you kind of lose focus. I was very excited to be back in the land-grant university, one of the largest universities in the country. Our enrollment just went up. That enrollment has grown almost 9,000 students since I came there in 2016. We're at about 56,300 students now. But much to my surprise, even though the university had touted its success as an engaged university, when I started as chancellor, I was surprised to learn that they had disinvested. They had cut the budget of the public engagement program. And those of you that know me, or based on what I said, you know that didn't sit well with me. And so we went about restructuring our public engagement effort. And don't get me wrong, we have more engagement at the individual faculty department level, I think, than any other university in higher education. However, that was not an institutional strategy. And so we've embarked upon a multi-million-dollar project where we are engaging and accelerating our engagement with community with everything from the social justice work that was really catalyzed by the very, very tragic George Floyd death back in my home state and hometown of Minnesota, and other issues of racism and injustice in our society has been one of the rallying points for us to think and act differently about the role of the university in solving societal challenges, all the way from institutional racism to social injustice. We are leveraging the fact that we have one of the most highly regarded engineering schools in the country, if not the world. And how do we use that to infuse technology and resilience and economic development and workforce development into our communities? And you also heard me talk about being anchored locally, but you also have to be where the people are. Urbana-Champaign is your typical small university college town, about 200,000 people in the whole county. And about 44% of that is made up of people that work at the university. We're the largest employer as a university per se, and we have a very large research part, which is the third largest employer. And the second largest employer is the hospital system that we partnered with to start the first world-class engineering-based college of medicine. And so we're a big game in town, and from that concern, we have big responsibility. But of late, I've been advocating for the fact that we're only 120 miles away from the third largest city in America, the city of Chicago, with about 9 million of the state's 12 million population concentrated there. I've got over 200,000 alumni there. And so I've been pushing the university that it has to have a strategic and high impact presence where the majority of the population is and where some of the greatest societal challenges are. And so we've been working very closely with the Chicago Public Schools to start thinking about how do you transform the process of teacher preparation, because I don't think we're going to get improvement in some of the outcomes until we change how teachers are trained. And also we got to do a better job of making sure more of our students are college ready. But let me just leave you with one example of how a big research idea also has a critically important public engagement element. About 2 years ago, Bob Zimmer, former president of the University of Chicago, came to me after American Association of American University meetings and said, I think we should go to the state and ask for $100 million for quantum computing to create this quantum computing center in Chicago. I agreed. Long story short, we asked for $100 million. The governor was impressed with the idea. He gave us $200 million. But it's not just about building this scientific hub. There's a critical social justice piece of this that is absolutely requiring us to think about how that quantum research facility is going to translate into jobs in the South Side of Chicago. How do you get people to think differently about STEM careers and possible careers in quantum? It is clearly one of the most exciting things that I've embarked upon. And I want to be respectful of the time. As you probably can tell, I could go on and on for another hour with this, but let me just say in conclusion, I am very, very honored to be part of this and very, very excited about the fact that this is work that we all need to be part of, and we can bring partnerships and networks together that are really going to be very, very transformative of our society. And we've always been present in communities that we're located, but we really do have to think about how do we develop reciprocal, big transformative ideas that certainly is going to continue to anchor us in those communities, but that will effectively make us a valuable resource for the 21st century and beyond. So let me end with that and say I'm truly honored to have this opportunity to spend a little time with you. And I certainly, this is something that I care greatly about, and I look forward to being able to address any questions you might have. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.